even carried more threat than shouting ever could. He asked who had given them the right. They laughed at first until they saw his eyes. Money made men bold, but authority made them careful. Caleb ordered them away, and they obeyed, muttering excuses that sounded weak even to themselves. When he knelt in the dirt in front of Nia, the entire street watched, stunned, as he lifted her chin gently as if she were made of glass. No one in Red Willow had ever touched her with kindness. She flinched, expecting pain, and that flinch did something to him. Something old and sharp, like guilt waking up after a long sleep. He asked her name. She hesitated, then said it anyway quietly, like a secret she expected to be stolen. Nia. He repeated it, carefully as if learning something important. He offered to have a doctor see her. She shook her head. Help always came with a price, and she had nothing left to pay. So he did the only thing he could do in that moment. He stayed. He helped her to the fence, gave her water, and sat with her while the town pretended not to stare. Whispers rippled through Red Willow like wildfire. Why would Harrington care? What game was he playing? But Caleb wasn't playing anything. He remembered a time, years ago, when he had been a young man riding escort for the army, believing the stories, believing the lies, believing that progress excused cruelty. He remembered a burned village. He remembered looking away, and now in front of him sat the living consequence of that looking away. Over the following days, he saw her everywhere, scrubbing steps, hauling water, enduring insults with a silence that felt heavier than screaming. And he noticed something else too. The town's cruelty sharpened when he was near, as if they resented her even more for having drawn his attention. When a shopkeeper refused her service outright and shoved her into the mud, Caleb stepped in again, paid for her goods, and warned the man quietly that he would take his business elsewhere if it happened again. That warning mattered. Harrington money fed Red Willow. Still, resentment grew like rot beneath the boards. People said she had bewitched him. They said she was manipulating him. They said worse things at night, behind closed doors. Nia tried to stay away from him, fearing the punishment that always followed kindness. But he sought her out anyway, offering work at his ranch, real work, paid fairly. She almost refused. Pride hurt more than hunger, but hunger eventually won. At the ranch, she was treated with something unfamiliar, indifference instead of hatred. No one spat at her. No one struck her. The quiet was overwhelming. She worked hard, harder than anyone asked, and said little. Caleb watched her from a distance, respecting the space she needed, noticing how she spoke to horses as if they understood her, how her hands were gentle despite everything they had suffered. The town noticed too, and the town did not forgive. When Nia returned to Red Willow one evening, she was ambushed, beaten more savagely than before, left sobbing in the dust behind the corral. That was how Caleb found her, bloodied and shaking, the sun dying behind him. He knelt again, his jaw tight, rage simmering beneath his calm. This time, when he lifted her face, there was no flinch. There was only exhaustion and a quiet question in her eyes. Why are you still here? He had no easy answer. He only knew that walking away now would make him the same man he had once been. And he could not live with that again. He carried her to his horse in full view of the town, every step a statement, every gaze daring someone to challenge him. That night, as she slept safely for the first time in years, Caleb made a decision that would shock Red Willow to its core. A decision born not of pity, but of resolve. The town had beaten her every day because it believed no one would stand beside her. It believed she was alone. It believed wrong. And if you're feeling the weight of this story already, if you want to know what happens when a powerful man chooses justice over comfort, and how love can rise from the dust of cruelty, make sure you subscribe now, because what comes next? Red Willow did not sleep the night. Caleb Harrington carried the Apache widow out of town, because towns like Red Willow fed on certainty, and he had shattered it with one silent act of defiance. By morning, rumors hardened into accusations and accusations into rage. People said Harrington had lost his mind, that he'd been seduced, cursed or shamed into weakness. Others whispered darker things, that he meant to make her his kept woman, hidden away on his ranch like some guilty secret. What no one imagined, not even Nia herself, was the truth he would soon speak aloud. When she woke in the ranch house guest room, clean sheets beneath her, sunlight spilling through the window like something sacred, her first instinct was to flee. Kindness had always been temporary, a calm before punishment. But Caleb did not hover or demand gratitude. He simply left food, clean clothes, and the space to choose. Days passed. Her wounds healed slowly, both the visible ones and the deeper bruises left by years of humiliation. She worked when she felt strong enough, earning her place with quiet dignity, and at night she sat alone on the porch, staring at the stars her people once named. Caleb joined her sometimes, never too close, never pressing, speaking instead about land, weather, horses, ordinary things that reminded her the world could be gentle. And in those silences something fragile grew, not romance at first, but recognition. He saw her not as a symbol or a debt to be paid, but as a woman of fierce endurance. She saw in him not a savior, but a man trying, perhaps too late, to stand on the right side of history. Red Willow, meanwhile, felt its control slipping. Without Naya to absorb their cruelty, their ugliness had nowhere to go, and that frightened them. Business owners complained that Harrington no longer shopped in town. The sheriff worried about losing his quiet support. The preacher thundered sermons about order and contamination. And when Caleb rode into town one week later and walked straight into the church on a Sunday morning, the congregation fell silent as a grave. He did not shout. He did not accuse. He simply stood before them and said that the woman they had beaten was under his protection, and that any harm done to her again would be answered, not with violence, but with consequences that would cost them dearly. Then he said something no one expected. He said he intended to marry her. The gasp that followed was not just shock. It was offense, as if he had violated some unspoken law of nature. Men rose from pews. Women clutched their children. Someone shouted that it was disgusting. Someone else said it was a sin. Caleb listened, unmoved, then reminded them that many of their fortunes were built on land taken by force, cattle raised by exploited hands, and silence bought with fear. If they wanted to talk about sin, he said calmly, they might want to look closer to home. He left them standing in their outrage, and by nightfall Red Willow was a town divided. When he told Naya of his decision, he did not dress it as a rescue or a grand gesture. He told her plainly, the town would never stop hurting her unless something fundamental changed. His name carried weight they could not ignore. Marriage would give her a shield no one could legally strip away. And if she said no, he would still protect her as best he could. The choice for once in her life was truly hers. She did not answer immediately. Marriage, to her, the town of Red Willow had a way of grinding people down until only dust remained, and no one knew that better than the Apache widow they called the squaw, though her real name, Nia, had once meant mourning. Light in her language, a meaning that felt like a cruel joke now. Every dawn she stepped into the street with her head lowered, knowing what waited for her: spittle in the dirt, muttered curses, stones kicked at her feet, sometimes worse. The townsfolk told themselves it was justice, that her people had once raided their cattle, that her husband had fought against settlers years before, even though Nia had buried him long before Red Willow was built. Grief had already taken everything from her: her home, her child, her tribe scattered by soldiers, but Red Willow took what little dignity she had left, day after day without mercy. The sheriff pretended not to see when the butcher's boy shoved her to the ground. The preacher looked away when women poured dirty water over her hair, calling it a cleansing. Children learned early that cruelty could be entertainment, and they laughed as she scrubbed floors for pennies. Her hands cracked and bleeding, her buckskin dress patched so many times it barely held together. She slept behind the livery stable, wrapped in old grain sacks, listening to the sounds of the town that hated her breathe and dream in comfort. Some nights she wondered if the spirits had forgotten her entirely. Other nights she prayed they had not, because being remembered hurt even more. Red Willow believed it had broken her. It was wrong. What the town did not understand was that Nia had survived. Things far worse than insults and blows. She had survived watching soldiers ride through her village, had survived hunger so deep it hollowed the bones, had survived burying her husband with her own hands. What kept her going was not hope but endurance, the quiet, stubborn refusal to disappear. And that refusal unsettled people, because broken things were supposed to stay broken. Then one afternoon, when the sun hung low and coppery over the corrals, a stranger rode into town, though to some he was no stranger at all. Caleb Harrington, the wealthiest rancher for 50 miles, owned land that stretched farther than most men could ride in a day, cattle by the thousands, and a reputation as solid as the oak posts he used for his fences. He was not known for charity, but he was known for fairness, and more than once his word had outweighed gold. He dismounted near the corral just as Nia was dragged out by two drunk hands from the saloon's back door, accused of stealing scraps she had been given only hours earlier. Her cheek was already swelling, blood drying along her jaw, and when one man struck her again, the sound cracked through the air like a gunshot. Caleb saw it all. The town froze when he moved, not fast, not loud, just deliberate, stepping. Between the man and the woman, everyone pretended was less than human. His voice low and was sacred, not a transaction. It was not a solution, it was a vow. That night she dreamed of her first husband, of the life stolen from her, of the fire and the screams. When she woke, she wept not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of being seen. She agreed, not because she needed saving, but because she believed in what the union could force the world to confront. The wedding was small and explosive all at once. Some ranch hands attended out of loyalty. Others stayed away out of fear. No one from Red Willow officially came, but many watched from a distance, drawn by morbid curiosity. Nia wore a simple dress, her hair braided in the way her mother had taught her, her spine straight despite the eyes that judged her. Caleb stood beside her, unflinching, his reputation now fully sacrificed on the altar of his choice. When the vows were spoken, the air itself seemed to shift, as if the land had been waiting for someone to finally say enough. The aftermath was brutal. Businesses refused them service. Children threw stones at their fence. Anonymous threats arrived by post. But something else happened too, something quieter, more dangerous to hatred. A few townspeople began to hesitate. A widow who had once looked away brought food. A rancher quietly followed Caleb's lead and hired native labor at fair wages. The sheriff enforced the law instead of opinion. Red Willow did not transform overnight, but the beating stopped. Publicly, at least. And that mattered. Nia grew into her new name, Mrs. Harrington, without shedding her old self. She spoke her language at home. She taught the ranch children stories of her people. She rode beside her husband, not behind him. And when townsfolk looked at her now, they no longer saw an easy target. They saw consequence. Years later, Red Willow would tell a different version of the story, one that painted itself kinder than it had been. But the truth lived on in the woman who survived it and the man who chose to stand where it cost him something. This was never a story about a wealthy rancher saving an Apache widow. It was a story about what happens when cruelty is challenged, when silence is broken, and when one decision forces a town to face itself. And if this story moved you, if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, remembered and shared, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because every subscription helps keep voices like Nia's alive and reminds the world that dignity, once defended, can change everything.